Hello, I'm Sean Jones and I'm the Clinical Director at Cary Counseling Center, and I want to welcome you to our second video in a series. If you recall, the first one talked about anxiety related to storms and tornadoes. Today what we want to talk about is how people respond to the trauma of being through a severe storm or a tornado where there is some damage either to their home or close to them, or they suffer in some way. And we want to take what we gave you in the first video and add to that with this one. The first thing that I want to say, if you have been through a tornado or a severe storm where there has been any kind of damage to your home, to your property, or to yourself, from now on you are typically going to have a heightened response to storms. Whether they are severe or not, you are going to be more anxious. You are going to be what we call hyper vigilant. You're going to watch the weather more. And that's a typical response. You will not hear me say that's a normal response because there's so many different ways we can identify that. But it is typical to have that response. It's almost, the way I put it is, it's to be expected. So it's not something you could be concerned about. It's something you should just understand is going to happen. It's kind of a survivor behavior. It's a good thing. The other thing I want you to recognize is after you've been through a severe storm or tornado, it is okay to have a wide range of emotions. And these may happen all at once, or they may hit you in different times, but it is, again, typical to have those. It's also extremely typical to feel very overwhelmed or unsettled because you have just been through a trauma where you had absolutely no control. It is typical to feel helpless. It is typical to feel like everything is out of your control, and that is not true, but you feel that way. So what we want to talk about today is how to help yourself and how to help your family after they've been through that trauma. So the first thing that I'm going to say is give yourself time to adjust. Going through this kind of a trauma is like going through any other difficulty in your life. You are going to have an emotional response. You are going to have days when you struggle. You have to understand you've got to give yourself some time. During that time, one of the things that is most helpful is if you work hard to reestablish your regular routine. Because we know when a storm comes and the power is out or your house is damaged, you may have to go live somewhere else for a while, or you may be without the luxuries of life for a while and your routine gets disrupted. So during this time that you're trying to adjust, also work to reestablish your routine. The other thing I would ask you to do is ask for support from positive people. We all have both negative and positive people in our lives. And we know those people who will listen to us, who will be empathetic and try to understand where we're coming from. Those are the people we need to reach out to. Those are the people we need to involve in our lives and try to have contact with while we are trying to readjust. The other one that I'm going to say, if you remember from the first video, I said one of the ways to manage your anxiety was to talk it out. And that's with your kids too. This is the exact same thing. When you have gone through a severe trauma of any kind, but especially with a storm, it helps to talk about your experience. Communicate that with other people. And, the more you tell the story, this is where I was, this is what happened, this is what it felt like when it was happening, the more you're actually normalizing that and you're getting rid of the negative emotions attached to that trauma. Now, the other thing I will say right here is that children need to talk. They need to talk through their experience. They need to get that out. And one of the things I'm going to tell you about children is they need to talk about it more than you need to hear it. So they are going to want to talk about it over and over and over until they are done with it. And if you're a parent or a caregiver or a family member or a friend who's got kids that have been through a tornado or a severe storm, I'm going to encourage you to be very patient and to hear that story as many times as those children need to tell it. Because what you need to understand is every time they tell it, they are getting rid of a little bit more of the anxiety that is attached to that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is find the community support. I know you've seen the videos of other towns and cities and counties that have been hit by storms, and you'll see devastation. In the midst of that devastation, all the neighbors are coming together to help each other out. And you'll see them outside their homes, and the storm has just passed, and they're looking for other support. The other thing is that your county, your city rallies around those people, and they're going to set things up to help people with food, with water, with places to stay. And you need to find those agencies that are helping, and in the midst of that, make sure you get the help you need. The next step that I would talk about is use healthy coping. Very often when we've been through traumas, we can frequently look for ways to cope that are not necessarily the best things. And this healthy coping is something you can absolutely control. It also helps you start to feel more in control. Remember, you just went through something where you felt totally helpless, totally out of control. So this speaks again to reestablishing your routine. So eat at a regular time and eat healthy food. Make sure you stay hydrated, get the right amount of sleep. Do all those things you can control that are healthy and help you cope. Now, I've already mentioned the community support and neighbors helping others. One of the things that helps us work through and manage our trauma is to help others who have been through the trauma, because it means that we are removing our focus on ourselves and we are helping them get rid of the emotions they have in dealing with this trauma. And believe it or not, that really helps you. So some of the typical responses that you can have to a severe storm or a tornado is you can relive the storm either in flashbacks or in dreams. That is not unusual at all, okay? And it frequently happens for a short period of time. Now the flashbacks, that can happen if, let's say, it starts to rain again, or there's just a mild storm, but it has thunder and lightning involved in it. You may catch yourself being pulled back into that severe storm that you've already lived through in your mind. So that's not unusual, okay? The other one is mood changes. You can be more anxious, you can be more depressed, or your mood can change frequently up and down. Another thing that we tend to do after a trauma is avoid the people that we were in that trauma with, or avoid the places where it happened. And again, all of these things are typical to happen after a trauma for a short period of time. The other one I've already talked about with you, and that's hyperarousal. That's where you are easily startled by loud noises. You get a racing heartbeat when you think you hear something that might be a storm. The other half of the hyperarousal is that you are going to be much more aware of the weather. You're going to be much more aware of storms that are coming. And that's not unusual. It's okay to do that. It just means you check the weather, and if it's okay, you move on. If you get stuck with these things, then we're going to talk about what to do with that in just a minute. The other thing you'll notice after a trauma is sometimes you can have trouble concentrating. You forget things easier. You don't finish tasks like you did before. You have that excessive anxiety and worry that interrupts everything that you're trying to do. The last one that I'll talk about is it's real changes in just you in general. You feel fatigued all the time, or you have appetite changes. You either eat way more than you used to, or you don't eat at all. And then you can sometimes have unexpected crying spells, and you're like crying and there's no reason for them. You just have those. Now, if you have any of those responses or all of those responses for a week or two after the storm, that is not unusual. And if they're diminishing, if they're getting less as the days go by, then you're actually working through those. Remember, if you go back to what we talked about earlier, I said give yourself time to adjust. And this is exactly where I'm talking about this. If you've got these things that are happening for 2 or 3 weeks, but they're getting less and less and you're doing better, then you're doing all right. You're working through it and you're managing your emotions. If, however, these are not getting less and you're not managing well and you continue to feel overwhelmed and unsettled, that is when you need to seek professional help. That is when you need to go talk to a therapist, a counselor, and work through the trauma that you have been in. And it is very possible for you to get rid of these symptoms that you're having, especially if they persist for more than 4 weeks. And they can help talk through it and they can get you back to a place where you are doing very well with your life and you can recover and move on. These are the things that we need to look for after we go through a tornado or a severe storm. We also talked about the things in the first video about how you can manage your anxiety about storms without ever having gone through one. So though you have those things to work with as well. The next video that we are going to look at is how to plan ahead, how to be ready for storms that show up, and how to be fully planned out and prepared for everything you need in case a storm hits. If you have reached a point where you need professional help or you just need to talk through things to get some support, please call us if you need any help. Thank you.